those who don't know, Chris Bryant MP is the Patron of Melanoma Focus, and he's been admirably open about his diagnosis previously of melanoma. And today we've got Chris with me to talk about his journey and particularly how he came to be diagnosed with melanoma and the treatment he's had, to try and illustrate some of the aspects of melanoma prevention and diagnosis which we feel as a charity, Melanoma Focus, we can help people with. Chris, can I take you back almost before you were diagnosed with melanoma, as to whether growing up you had any sense of perhaps some of the dangers that sun exposure could lead to, or had there been any education in your life around sun safety? Was it something that you were ever aware of?
Well, it was probably the opposite of education in a sense. My parents, although my dad is Welsh and my mum was Scottish, they met in Spain where Dad was working during summer in a hotel. And so when I was 7, we went to live in Spain for 5 years, and Mum used to cover herself in olive oil to go out in the sun. I have the kind of skin that is designed for rain, not for sun. And I'm sure I got sunburnt quite often when I was a kid.
Certainly the message that Melanoma Focus is trying to make people aware of, or help make people aware of, is around sun safety, sun protection, particularly with their children.
And I think there are just sensible things you can do, like sticking out of the midday sun, notwithstanding Noel Coward. And you can, and by midday, I kind of mean from like 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, especially if you're in other climes. You have to bear in mind that even though the sun may not feel very intense because there's a breeze or a wind, it might nonetheless be burning you. Use, high factor. Lotion bottles now have very clear indications. Probably a good idea to buy new every year rather than keep on using the bottle that you bought 5 years ago, which you haven't quite finished yet. For me, I think in particular, one of the places I used to burn was at the top of my ears, my nose. I remember once a whole nose skin peel came off in one, with a freckle attached, I think, and covering your scalp, your head. It's not. I still have a decent amount of hair, but nonetheless, it burns very easily in there.
That's where your melanoma arose, wasn't it, Chris? It was on your scalp.
Yes.
There we can see the scar and a bit of nice bit of surgery that was done for you. It's a hard place for you to spot. Talk us through how it was diagnosed, Chris.
So it was like a mole, a bit raised. It had a dodgy edge to it, and it was 2 colours. I didn't know at the time that was serious, but I thought it might be something and I wanted to get it checked out. But it was Christmas time, didn't get round to it. And then it was my birthday and I was driving past my local GP surgery in the Rhondda and I went, you know what, I might as well just pop in.
So if we can't prevent it, and we think that with good sun safety, we can prevent a lot of melanomas, the next best thing is to catch it early.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you can see the mole, and we want everyone to be skin aware and not be embarrassed, particularly men, not be embarrassed about doing exactly what you did, which is going to the GP thinking, well, it's probably nothing, but I'd much rather it get checked out. So you did absolutely brilliantly the right thing. We'd really want to encourage people to do that. But also on the part of your body which you can't see, you do have to rely on partners, husbands, wives, to also be, not embarrassed to say that's a funny looking thing.
Especially because, as I understand it, your back is quite a common area, and of course you would never see that. And whereas you might feel something on your head, you might not feel anything on your back.
Absolutely. So early detection, people being skin aware. The other thing to say is that the majority of pigmented lesions that are biopsied are benign. That's a great result for people.
After they'd cut it out, they'd done the first excision, and I remember the nurses were playing a lot of ABBA for some reason. ABBA and Erasure is all I remember, but maybe that says more about me than it does about anything else. Anyway, and it's quite difficult on the head because you have to sort of pull the skin in a bit. So I've had a slight facelift. But she said, the dermatologist said, oh, it's quite thick, which was obviously not a good sign. And I worried about that, but I thought, oh, well, it'll be all right. I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyway, the best piece of advice that somebody gave me was, when you're going back for your results, take somebody with you, because you might not be able to hear as clearly as you think you've heard what the clinicians actually said to you. The bit I remember most clearly was saying, so what are my chances of living? And the dermatologist, who was wonderful, but she said, do you really want to know? And I said, well, yes, I do. And she said, maybe 40% a year. And that was a real sort of body blow. It feels all quite frightening.
As a charity, we're hoping to provide extra support for people. We run a helpline staffed by clinically specialist nurses in melanoma. Chris, moving you forward then to the surgery, and you then had quite a big operation. Obviously, you had your diagnostic biopsy, then you had so after that, I first met you when you'd had your wider excision. Talk us through that. What was the experience of that like?
Well, originally we were going to do the wider excision on a local anaesthetic, and I was kind of, ready for that. But then they decided, because they were taking a chunk out of here to fit in the hole up there, that would mean turning me over, and it was just easier to do that if I was fully out, which was fine. This was all in Merthyr, and it all went fine, but it involved quite a lot of, the back of my head being taken out and right the way down to the bone. And sort of stitching another bit of my skin in here, and then looking after the wound is quite difficult on your head, because obviously you want to keep it dry, but at the same time you want to look presentable, so you want to be able to wash your hair and things like that. And it's difficult to stick plasters on your head when you've got hair. So there were all sorts of complications around that. And then somehow or other the skin graft didn't quite take, and it sort of bubbled up, and then it ended up turning into necrotic tissue. That's another one I know. And then it had to be debrided, another term I now know.
We had just started using relatively recently what's another term that people won't necessarily be familiar with, which is adjuvant treatment. So this is adding on treatment to surgery. So up until very recently, the treatment for melanoma was just surgery, just as you had. But we've now got a couple of different classes of drug therapies that we're using to try and reduce the risk of cancer ever returning. Did you feel that that was a difficult decision to make, trading the sort of risks and benefits of sort of treatment?
When you've got something like this, partly because you don't, I slept terribly the first night after the diagnosis and all of that. Best advice I had then was, today will be your worst day on this. But the tendency is to look at Google all the time, and Dr. Google is extremely unreliable, because you have no way of knowing whether this article is new or accurate or relates to the UK or other parts of the world and all the rest of it. So, you end up in a sort of cycle of doom. And that's why I think reliable websites that, such as Melanoma Focus and the NHS and various others are really, really important. When it came to the decision about treatment, no, I was, bearing in mind, I'd been told that I was like 40% likely to live a year. This is 3 years ago now. Whereas all the indications showed that with the adjuvant treatment, whichever of the two it was, the chances of survival rose dramatically. It was a no-brainer, really.
People will be worried about having these drug treatments, but these drug treatments are very different than traditional cancer therapies. Both the targeted treatment that you had and the immune therapy, which is the other type of treatment we use for melanoma. The side effect profiles of those treatments, although they can be tough, not always, and people, with the right advice, the right support, do get through treatments, remarkably well, and there's a lot to be gained from them. So again, if people need support and help, we're there for them as the charity to guide them through the decision around whether they want treatment, what type of treatment, and managing the side effects of therapy.
Melanoma seems especially sort of insidious to me, because it can spread to other parts of the body, through the lymphatic system or through the blood, and you never know where it might end up. And sometimes that, of course, makes you more fearful than you need be, which is why I personally find the ongoing checks every 3 months and then 6 months and so on, I find them very reassuring, though of course I'm endlessly deciding that I'm about to die of cancer of the knee or whatever, or the earlobe or whatever. But and 3 years now, everything seems fine, which is great. But I'm also conscious that sometimes people are so frightened that they just don't want to take part anymore. And that is a really big mistake, because I remember at a dinner with you and some other people who've been working in this field for a long time, one woman said to me, it was such a delight that she'd worked in melanoma and skin cancer for 35 years. And for 30 of those years, all she'd ever really been able to do was manage people's expectations about when they might die. And for the last 5 years, she's been able to save people's lives. And that's just a phenomenal, it's as what has happened in research and medicine in relation to melanoma is just as significant as what has happened in relation to coronavirus or anything else. Research, having good path labs, the whole mixture of the thing is really, really important, and all those public messages, because there's so much we can do to protect ourselves.
Thank you, Chris. And again, one important thing that we do as a charity is to fund what we hope is innovative and helpful research for this disease.